Ellen, I can share that slide from mine if you want. It's probably easier.
Okay, go ahead. So anyway, welcome to the Effective Communications Action Team. And it's our monthly webinar, and I am really delighted that we have Steve Levin with us tonight. He, as you can see on the screen, is an executive coach for a long time, for 20 years, and he leads what he calls powerful conversations workshops for leaders and coaches. And if you've been part of the Presenters Action Team, you may have seen his introductory presentation, which is, he really freshened it up for us. It was quite lovely. He has a BA and an MA in organizational behavior from Yale, and he's a master certified coach by the International Coach Federation. So once again, we have another just really superb volunteer here to help us out. And I have really enjoyed working with Steve and getting to know him, and think this subject that he's talking about tonight is really useful. So Steve, thanks for being here, and just take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Madeline, and hi, everybody. And in addition to those sort of biographical elements, I'm really a grateful CCL volunteer. If it weren't for CCL, I wouldn't know where to begin and what to do. And I'm really, let's see, can you hear me okay? Wait, I can't hear you. Why is that?
Because I muted everybody.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. You know, CCL really helped me find a way to address climate change. I had no idea, what do we do about this thing? So all of us are on this great journey to try to make a huge difference, in anything that I can do to support that, I want to do. So I'm just so privileged to be here with you. So today we're going to talk about reframing as a way to move people from resistance to support. And of course, it's nice when people come along with us. We explain something, they go, that sounds great, where do I sign up? But it doesn't always happen. So we need to find a way to address it so that when they object to what we say, we connect. Or since we're talking about reframing, if they want to cast blame, we just reframe. This is our way of shifting the dialogue to help them join us willingly and gratefully. So what do we mean by reframing? Well, think about reframing as proposing a fresh perspective, something new, a new way of looking that engages all of us to build a better future together. If the frame doesn't point towards the future, what good is it? So we want something that will include you and me and get us moving forward. And one way to think about it is that perspective is so important. Imagine that you are shipwrecked and you manage to get to a desert island, and there you are on the desert island, and you see in the distance and you go, boat, boat, and your dreams have been answered, your prayers have been answered, the boat is coming. But wait, then you consider the other guy's perspective. He's saying, land. Uh-oh. I thought I had a great perspective. I thought boat was the way to go. But he's saying land. I have to find a way to bridge the perspectives between the two of us. Otherwise, we're both going to be disappointed when he lands. So how do we do that? Well, the answer is through reframing. And I learned about the power of reframing through a story in a major Midwestern city in the US where people got along very, very well. It was a very harmonious city. The civil society was great. Everybody really, they had their differences, they got along, except when it came to one issue, and that is the right to life, or the right to choose abortion. And in that instance, one side said, we need to ban all the abortions now. It's a travesty, it's immoral. And the other side said, we have to make all abortions legal immediately. And they went at each other tooth and claw. A lot of heat generated, not a lot of light. And the mayor was really distressed because this community got along well. And he said, listen, I'm going to bring together all the leaders from both sides. We're going to give you a 1-hour training on how to communicate differently. Then I'm going to put you in a room, and I want you in a very short time to come up with an agenda that you can both share. Both sides will support, actively support, to make something happen. Well, they rolled their eyes and said, well, whatever, we'll try. And so they got the 1-hour training, a lot like this training. They went into the room, and at first they were shouting, and they were trying to be polite. They fell in the shouting. One person though remembered the training. They started to use it, and within 2 hours, they came up with 5 points on which they agreed in an action plan. So how did they do it? Now, can you unmute everybody? I want to get a little interaction here, and I also want to kind of see people.
Sure.
So I want you guys to unmute yourselves. I was going to ask you for like a boast boy. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to show you a method. I want you to say either yes, like did they do it this way? I want you to say either yes or no, so we can hear each other. You ready?
Sure.
You're unmuted.
Ready? Well, if you're ready, say yes.
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 All right, good. Let's get it a little quicker here, folks. Here we go. So first of all, do you think they did in 2 hours? They did a detailed, thorough analysis of every possible.
No.
Yes or
No.
No way.
No, they didn't. Well, what about this? Do you think they really got to know each other? They did relationship building,
No.
and they talked
No.
about kids and
No.
families. What
No.
do you think? Yes or no?
No.
No.
Yeah.
No time for that. All right. What about bringing in a real pro to negotiate and compromise and get through all the issues and batter out something? You think they did that?
No.
No, they didn't. All right. Well, what did they do? Do you think they might have done deeper listening, connecting on values, finding a better frame for productive collaboration? What do you think? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 Yes, that's exactly what they did. Some of you are naysayers. You got to stop that. Yes, that is what they did. And that's what we're going to learn how to do. And what do you think they came up with? I mean, look at these two sides. Ban abortions now. Make all abortions legal. How could they possibly find common ground? What frame could possibly bring them together? Are there any ideas? Shout it out.
They both value
Prevent the
life.
occasion for abortion.
Say it again, Dan.
Prevent the occasion for abortion.
Prevent the need, which means let's
Contraception.
work together to
Right.
prevent unwanted pregnancies.
Hmm.
Oh, it sounds so obvious once you say it, but they couldn't see it until they started to consider the other guy's perspective, until they tuned into each other's deep needs, not their positions. So what we're going to see is there are 4 steps to reframing. They're simple. You actually probably do some or all of these because CCL has as its bedrock listening, respect, collaboration. So I'm putting a little bit of form to what you may already know. So the first is to listen more deeply. Because when we listen deeply, it's not just that we know what they say, we discover the values and concerns that are underneath their views, that are revealed by their views. And once we've listened, what do? Well, we have to join where we can. There's always something we can join. If we listen for the opportunity of where there might be some agreement on some value, some concern, we can join. And when we join, we actually add momentum to the conversation. And we tap their energy as a resource for what comes next. And once we join, now comes the creative part. I wonder, what is a better frame? What's a frame that is based on our shared values and points to the future? And if I find that frame, I can respond within that frame, and we do our usual CCL thing of engaging in dialogue with mutual respect. It works great. Let's see how it works. We're going to take an example. This is interactive, so please chime in when I ask a question, because the whole idea is for us to for you not just to listen to what I'm saying, but to create this with me. So let's imagine that here we are talking about the bill, and someone says, well, listen, I'm sorry, I'll just never work with Republicans or with Democrats. You can't trust them. Well, a normal and reasonable response would be, well, we have to work together. We need bipartisan support. You might argue with them. Do you think that's going to be fully effective to someone who doesn't trust the other side? No, it's not. So I wonder what we can do differently if we think about reframing. Well, if we think about this as the surface, and the iceberg idea that most of the iceberg is underneath the water line, underneath the water here, below the surface, are values and a frame. So when someone says, I'll never work with Republicans or Democrats, you can't trust them without thinking too hard about it. What do you think they really value here? What's important to them?
Trust.
Trust. Yeah, they want trust. So we can affirm that. We can join them on that. We can say, wow, I hear you really value trust and integrity, don't you? That's really important to you. So I'm not creating anything new. They told me they value trust. You really value trust and integrity. And notice the way I'm speaking is I'm joining them. You really value that. That's really important to you. Notice the tone, the attitude, the mindset I have. I'm with you. Then I can take the next step. So if I want to validate that you value trust and integrity, but I still want to move you where I want to go, what can I say next? I might say, you're right. We need to follow your example of being honest about low trust. Then find a way to build enough trust to effective policy. I wonder how we can do that. Or maybe there's a variation we can use. Yes, in this climate of low trust, everyone is suspicious and policies don't pass. Somehow, we need to restore authentic trust. I wonder how we can do that. Fortunately, our approach lets people earn trust by working together in pairs. We have Democrats and Republicans working together, earning trust step by step in the bipartisan caucus, blah, blah, blah. We go into our usual thing. Everyone see it? Yeah? Give me a, oh yes. I don't hear you. You're on mute.
Steve, some people are muted, and if there's background noise, I'm muting them because otherwise this recording's not going to work. So
all right, we got
when
it.
you want to shout out, you're going to have to unmute yourself, folks.
All right. Thank you so much. So anyway, that's the first example. Let's do another example, and this time you're going to do the work. Oh, by the way, did you notice, before we go on, did you notice that when they said, I'll never work with the other side, you can't trust them, I don't say a thing. I listen for their values, discover what it is. I join where I can. You value trust. I propose a frame. With trust so low, it's clear we need to somehow restore authentic trust. How can we? Then I respond and say, fortunately, we can do it. So you see the 4 steps. Let's go to the next example. Someone says, you know what? I'm a libertarian and this is big government, the nanny state telling me what to do. I just don't believe in this stuff. Let private enterprise do its thing. Well, a reasonable response is, no, don't worry. Carbon fee and dividend doesn't grow. Government fees are blah, 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 blah. They're not hearing you. As soon as you say the word government, they're turned off. So let's look, what are the values that we can affirm? You guys tell me. Unmute yourself and make a guess. What does this person care about?
Free will, independence.
Individual
Free will, independence, choice, right? Don't tell me what to do. I get to choose, right? The freedom to choose. Anything else?
No, seems about it.
How about being responsible? Instead of the government telling you what to do, people should be responsible for themselves. That's a libertarian thing, right? So we might affirm those values. We might say, yes. Notice I always start with yes. You don't have to do it that way, but energetically, it's always yes. You want the freedom to choose and take responsibility for your choices, don't you? Yeah, absolutely. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So the question becomes, how can we help people to freely choose what is good for the planet? And you notice I ask this as a question. I like to think of this as, here's a puzzle we need to solve together. Because if I'm collaborating, I'm not telling them what to do. I'm exploring with them what's possible in a creative, imaginative way. So I wonder how we can do that. So what could you say as a response, if that's the frame? What is it about our proposal that actually helps people to freely choose?
Dividend.
I can't hear you once more.
People can choose what to do with the dividend.
They can choose whether, fortunately, our carbon fee and dividend plan relies on incentives, not regulations. It's absolutely true. Notice how this speaks so directly to freedom to choose, taking responsibility. So it fits the facts, it affirms their values. Okay, you guys get the hang of it? It's time to practice. Here's the template. When they say X, what are the values? What's the frame we can propose? And once we've done that, what's the response we can have? Now I have some practice scenarios. And Madeline, I'd like your ideas here. We could do breakouts or we could do this as a group in dialogue. We don't have to do every one. I'm also thinking if you guys have objections, we might have time to take one of yours and work this through, but I want to show you a couple that I think will be valuable. So here are 3 nominations of objections. A carbon tax is regressive and grossly unfair. Low-income people, especially people of color, need justice, not higher costs. So how do you respond to that? Carbon tax is regressive and unfair. Second objection, this bill is too weak. It limits regulations, it misses methane emissions, it gives polluters a free pass. I can't support it. Third one is, you know, if we go alone with carbon fee and dividend, it's going to hurt the US economy, even with border adjustments. I took away your free pass, border. Nope, don't get that one. As a patriot, I want to win the race against the competition. Can you see that all of these are reasonable objections someone might raise?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. So what we want to do is look at this template and take these ideas and see if we can tease out the values, the frames, and the response. Now, we have some people on the phone, and I don't think they can see this. You can't see the screen, so that's a little bit tough. I'll tell you what. I don't know. Madeline, do you have an idea? Should we do breakouts?
If we do breakouts, nobody will see the screen.
Yeah.
We can type into the chat and they can see that, but you might want to do another 1 or 2 together and practice that way.
Yeah, I think maybe that's better. And then maybe I think we'll stay as a large group. Zoom is not great on breakouts, and this way we can create it. Okay, thank you. That's great input. All right, well, let's start with the first one. And actually, everyone, please open up the chat if you have it. Let's see where mine is.
Down on the toolbar on the bottom.
Yeah. And this one says, whoops, sorry about that. So a carbon tax is regressive, grossly unfair, low-income people, especially people of color, need justice, not higher costs. So in the chat, what are the values of this statement? Actually, I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to take this out of, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment.
You got one already.
All right, hang on. I'm going back to the chat. I'm going to paste in here these 3 statements so we can look at them in the chat. So we're in the first one. A carbon tax is regressive and grossly unfair. Low-income people need, especially people of color, need justice, not higher costs. All right. So let's see what we got. Value is justice for vulnerable people. Yes. I hear you value justice and equitable treatment of vulnerable communities. So the values would be justice and equity. What's another word for justice and equity that relates to what we can offer? There's a synonym. Fairness is the shared value. I'm going to pick that one. Fairness is something that everyone who cares about justice and equity will relate to, but fairness is something that we can really speak to also. So there's this little trick of you find what they care about, you think about what we have, and you look for the bridge. Everything they care about, we can't offer. And everything we offer, they don't care about. But there's always a bridge if we look for it. That's right. Fairness is so important. Let's go back to the share. And let me go back. So we got the fairness, scenario 1, 2, 3. So we might say under scenario 1, I'll do it this way so I can type it. I think I can. Okay, so we might say, you really value fairness. You don't want people of low means to be disadvantaged. Now notice I'm picking up on what they're saying, but I'm using language that I can work with. So what would be a frame that works with this? Let's hear from you. Yeah, you really value fairness, and you don't want people of low means or of little means to be disadvantaged. So the question is, how can we what? So how can we reduce CO2 in a way that
Doesn't burden people.
that makes the polluters pay the most and actually supports those of little means who use low carbon. See how we're setting it up? And then the answer is, fortunately, the REMI study says whoops. Everyone get it?
Yeah.
Any questions about this? Unmute yourself. Let me check in with you guys. See what you're noticing. What are you noticing about this whole thing? What insights do you have? What ideas do you have? Right, let me ask you a different question because that one didn't go anywhere. Look, what I'm demonstrating is it's not rocket science, but there are a few like things. If you say you can, I think you can see this works, right? You kind of sound like, oh yeah, this works pretty well. What is it that makes it work? What's the secret sauce? And I want you to type it in the chat. What is it about this method that seems to be effective that we want to remember and practice? So, Lori, we're connecting around shared values and making them feel heard. Absolutely. You're describing what we're proposing instead of proposing it. That's a really good insight. I'm not taking the point of view of convincing you. I'm giving you information so we can look at it together, sort of side by side. You make people feel heard and understood by really tuning into what they say and validating the deep underlying needs. Listening is part of it. And speaking as though we're on the same team, because guess what? We are on the same team. They just don't realize it yet. In a way, that's a great insight, that the secret sauce of reframing is not believing or not buying into the idea that they are on the opposite side. They may think they're on the opposite side, but we know that they just don't realize how we're on the same side. So our mindset of looking for the commonality, connecting the dots between the values and their values and our solution, absolutely, and turning their worry and objection into a shared problem that we have a solution to. I love that. And I love this idea, you know, as a coach, I often work with clients around their toughest dilemmas. And I say, you know, let's look at this as a puzzle that we need to solve together. You know, this idea of sitting around a table doing a jigsaw puzzle. How about this one? Does this fit? Does that fit? Let's explore. There's an exploratory quality. Okay. Would you like to do another?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
How about we go to let's see where we are. Scenario number 2. Here we are. This bill is too weak. It limits regulations. It misses methane. It gives polluters a free pass. I can't support this. Blah, blah, blah. All right. What are the values? What do they care about? They're telling you, believe me, if you listen to what they're saying, embedded in this language, is just a huge clue about what they care about. What's the most obvious thing they care about?
Sucking it to the fossil fuel industry.
Strength.
They care about strength, maybe effectiveness, right? They care the opposite of weak and missing things and giving a free pass is accountability.
Yeah.
And effectiveness, right? So how about we just go with that? So obvious, right? Yes. We need our approach to be truly effective in reducing CO2 and hold people accountable for their actions. Right? Isn't that what they're saying? Notice I'm generalizing. Now here's a little trick, advanced skill. Don't get hooked on their specifics because we do miss methane. And you know, we do limit regulation. So you can't argue and say, no, we don't really regulate, we don't really limit regulations. Well, actually we do. They're right. So we're not going to engage them around something we can't join them on. We're listening for what we can join them on underneath, which is true effectiveness, reducing CO2 and accountability. Now, does our bill do that? Is it truly effective, at least in some ways? Does it hold people accountable? Absolutely. So what's the framework they're going to propose? How about if you guys type in the chat, what would be a frame? So the question is, how does our bill, or how can we what do you think? If you're on the phone, you can just shout it out.
And *6 is the way you unmute if you're muted on the phone.
Thank you. Yeah. Jeff says, you must demonstrate efficacy. That's good. That's a value. It needs to be truly effective. Demonstrate efficacy. Propose a frame. Any ideas out there? This limits regulations, misses methane, gives a free pass to polluters. Well, we do need our approach to be truly effective in reducing CO2, and we have to hold people accountable for their actions. You're absolutely right. I'm with you there. You can see me joining you up, down, and sideways on that one. Why not? I'm happy to join you, can. And now I need to propose. So the question is, how do we hold people accountable and make sure we're effectively reducing CO2? Or here's another way to do it. So how can we reduce a lot of CO2 in a short time? Because I know they care about that, right? While making sure that the biggest polluters pay the most. They care about that. By the way, I didn't plan this. I didn't know what we were going to say. This it's just right there, right? We just flip it from the need to a frame. How can we do? Fortunately, what does our bill do? You don't have to say fortunately. It's kind of corny. The good news is CF&D will reduce emissions by, 40% within how long?
10 years.
Within 10 years. A huge step forward. And the fossil fuel industry, the biggest contributor, will pay the most. Actually, they won't pay, but they'll be affected the most. Can you see how this relates to this, but it passes through this tunnel of a frame? Now, notice also, we're not disputing their observations. We do limit regulations. We do miss methane. But we're addressing what they really care about, and that's more important. Don't get hooked by arguing with them on something they're right about. Refocus on what we know is important because it meets their values. Okay. I really want to get a little feedback from you, questions, ideas, and then I think instead of doing our third scenario that I had, maybe someone here has a scenario that we could work with, an objection that you've heard or something you want to be able to counter. I'd be very open to that. If it's too difficult for me to do, I'll just ask Madeline to do it because that's why she's here. Right, Madeline? Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I know. I didn't leave you out there. All right. So anyone have an example of a challenging statement that is resistance? Now, by the way, let's not work with someone, let's not do it with someone who is a complete denier, anti-person. We're looking for someone who is joinable if we do it well, as opposed to the Antichrist of climate change. So what are some objections that we want to be able to work with here?
There's one in the chat about China. That's the classic. What about China and India?
Yeah. Well, that's actually our third scenario that I had teed up. Maybe we look at that together. If we go alone, it'll hurt the U.S. economy. I want to win against the competition. China and India, are in a huge race with us, and we have to beat them. And if they don't come along, it's going to hurt us. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
All right. So, what are the values? What's revealed? Lori said the same thing. It doesn't matter if we reduce emissions, if the rest of the world isn't with us. So there's fear.
Keeping our economy strong.
Yeah, that's good. So beautiful.
Fairness.
Yes. We need a strong economy. And any solution needs to support our economic well-being. I like that one. What else? I think there's another value here. What do you make of this winning the race, competition, this competitive mindset? See how important that is, not to be a sucker, not to be a loser. You can see it right there. I want to win the race against competition. So how could climate change make us a loser? Susan wrote, we all need to win. We absolutely, but instead of all, I'm going to wait on that, Susan. I'm going to say we absolutely need to win the race against global warming. We're in a race, aren't we? CO2 emissions are going up. So if this idea of the need to win, but notice I'm shifting it from a need to win against other people to a need to win against the situation. But I'm still focusing on the value of winning. Support our economic well-being. You can see the setup right here. So what would be a frame? So how can we what? What's needed here? How can we reduce CO2 with a thriving economy and create the conditions where other countries will want to join us in this race? Wonder how we can do that. We do need China and India to come on board. Fortunately, so what are some things that we can say about that you know? We say them all the time, features of our solution. Yeah, border adjustments. We'll give them an incentive, right? New job creation helps our economy, right? Dividend encourages robust economic growth. These are all things that are true that we can say. Okay. So these are just tip of the iceberg. I think what I'd like to do is look at these 4 steps again and check yourself to say, I wonder whether I can do these. Or first of all, am I already doing these? And which of these do I want to do a little bit more or better in order to work with people when they have concerns? Do I need to listen more deeply to discover their values? Do I need to find that place where I can join them instead of debating them? I meet them where they are and I use their energy. Do I need to think, where's the bridge? What frame can I propose that is based on shared values, pointing to the future, and then can I populate that frame? So I think at this point, I'd like to actually have some discussion and kind of hear your thoughts about this whole method and what's easy and what's hard. We have just a few minutes, I think. Madeline, what do we have, about 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's open it up and please unmute yourself and I think I'll stop the share so we can see each other a little better. Everyone can see. And what do you notice about what we've covered today? What's worth remembering? What's worth doing yourself?
Well, I'll jump in. Hearing this for the second time, I find it easier to think about what are the underlying values. But I heard even more clearly this time, I don't have to respond to the specifics, just really go for the underlying values. And the harder part to me is the frame. It helps to think of it as how can we, but even then it's like I'm working really hard to figure out, other than just repeating like, how can we do quote shared values?
Right.
That's the hard part.
Very good. So we'll take those. You made 2 great points here. First, this idea of you don't have to respond to their specific objection. In fact, I urge you not to engage in their specific objections. It's a trap. You don't need to satisfy them at the level at which they are thinking. You need to satisfy them at the deeper level at which they are caring. That's the shared value part. And in your mind, when you're listening to them, you're hearing what they're saying and you're sorting like, what is the underlying value? What do they care about? I'm only focusing on their values and needs. And that's where I'm going to join them. So it's really brilliant to not get snagged on their specific objections. On the other hand, their objections are clues to what they value. So you don't ignore their objections or the specifics, but you don't engage them on it. In terms of putting together the frame, I'm glad you raised this, Madeline, because I hadn't said this. Once you hear their objection and you know what they care about, it's important to think, well, what can we offer? What am I eventually going to say? So for instance, the one around, this is a nanny state, government telling us what to do. I know they care about freedom of choice. I know instantly I'm going to talk about incentives. But before I talk about incentives, I'm going to set the stage with a frame so that when I talk about incentives, it makes sense to them. So I'm reverse engineering. I'm starting with my solution incentives. I'm working my way back and saying, let's see, how can I bring up incentives? Okay, so the question is, how can we give people freedom of choice and have them take responsibility for choices? Fortunately, we use incentives. So I kind of know where I'm going, and then I put in the frame as the bridge. What do you think, Madeline? Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that does help. It's still going to be slow. It's like, okay, what do I want to say now? How do I set the
Yeah.
stage so that it looks so that there's a connection? Yeah.
Right. It takes a little practice, like all good communication skills, but it's something available to all of us. Who else has an idea? Catherine, I think you're speaking, but I can't tell. Maybe you're just coughing. Maybe not. Other comments?
I think this seems incredibly useful. I'm going to an event tomorrow night where I think I may have to use the scenario about the carbon fee and dividend not having enough teeth in terms of methane and the rest. So I'm looking forward to giving that one a try. And I just feel like I'm going to need a lot of practice to get there, but it's a great template for having a conversation.
Right. You know, another thing around not having a lot of teeth is to say, yes, it's important that it be effective and way more effective than anything we're doing now.
That's good.
So, you know, what are we doing now? Not much. You know, so we see this as a fantastic first step. Gets us on the path and allows us to then leverage that for further steps. So this idea of seeing it, there's another little trick we're doing here, is we're not seeing it as a one and done. We're looking at this as a longer game. And we're saying this is a crucial first step for that long game that you and I both care about. Okay, Susan, you said it privately, but I'm going to out you because I think it's great. My problem is the methane lack of regulations was one of your previous, your answer didn't move me. We need to reduce methane. The sooner the better because it buys us more time on the CO2. Yeah, what happens if someone brings up the methane? What is our response to that? Forget about reframing. What's the most skillful response? Why don't you address methane? This is the time when I really would like an answer.
Aren't there,
In business, the price of bipartisan business, right?
The price of bipartisan is that we can't address methane? I'm not sure. Let's see. What other answers are there?
aren't there some EPA regulations on methane right now in effect?
And I believe, I'm not as expert on the bill as many of you, I believe there's nothing in this bill that prevents methane regulation.
That's true. And the issue partly or majorly is that there's not a yet as good an understanding as we need around how to measure it. And if you can't measure it precisely, you can't put a fee on it well.
So look, let's agree that our bill doesn't do everything for all people as perfectly as everyone would like. That's just obvious. And there's no point in pretending that there's no point in overpromising what we can do. So if we were to dig in, take Susan or anyone else, anyone could play this. So when you say that, let's deal with methane for a moment. We'll just do that one. So methane is a concern. And when you hear that this bill doesn't address it, what arises for you, Susan? What is it that you're thinking or feeling that's important here? Now notice, I don't know what anyone's going to say, but I'm asking. I'm actually digging for more information. So what would someone say? Yeah, Susan, go ahead.
If you look at the science, that we need to get, the best way to get long-term reduction is to start with the methane, because it will buy you more time on the CO2. And we're gonna need that time, even with this bill. You're not getting, you're too little too late. And we need to get the methane down. And I'm afraid when this comes in that you're gonna lose the regulations. We're already losing the regulations. They're already trying to take away the methane regulation. And now it's happening.
Now, in a couple of minutes, let's see if I can do justice to that. First of all, thank you, Susan.
Sorry, I'm a hard customer.
All right, we love you, hard customers. It makes us work a little harder. So notice what Susan is doing. I'm going to talk about you is she feels passionately that we need to buy time, that we need to extend. We need to do whatever we can to push out the rise of greenhouse gases, potent greenhouse gases, however we can push that out. She has the belief that methane should come first before CO2. I don't think that's right. Doesn't matter what I think, but I think that's something that we could challenge. We can say something like this. So I really get how important it is for you, Susan, and for all of us to do whatever we can to push out the greenhouse gas accumulation as much as possible so that the technology can develop, so that we can get more countries on board. We need to do whatever we can to extend the time horizon because we are in a race against time. And you see methane is an important component of that. Is that right, Susan?
Yes.
Okay, notice where I'm joining her, the race against time. So when we looked at the options for a bill, we looked and we said, what can we do now that has a chance of passing with bipartisan support, that is measurable, that people will join on, that will allow us to push things out? And we found CO2 to be the easiest place to go first to extend that timeline. If we could have done methane at the same time, we would. But when we looked at our options, we saw this is where we need to dig in now in order to get that extra time for our future. If people want to work on methane as well, that's great too. But here's where we know we can make a difference. How does that land for you, Susan? Can you join us in supporting this? Time out.
You're not
Yeah.
You're not seeing the science that says we got to get the methane down quickly, or else we're going to have to work harder later. And the best way to get a slower fall on the pain of this thing is to get the methane first. And that's what the science says.
Yeah. And I'm not addressing that. I am bypassing that and attempting to go for your underlying value of extending the time frame and hoping to join on that. And you know what? It doesn't always work. Not everyone is going to come along. They're going to have their differences. I'm okay with it. So I think we're gonna pause here. I want to thank you for your participation and listening and kind of puzzling this out with me. I hope you got something of great utility for you wherever you are in your journey. We're all in this journey together. And I don't know if anyone has some closing words. We're open to that. And Madeline, you can close us out in whatever way is your tradition.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Steve. I think this was really valuable and worth listening to more than once. And if you want to come back and listen to it, the recording will be posted for sure on the Effective Communications Action Team. And it's possible it will also make its way into the communication skills training section on Community also. I appreciate all the contributions people made and your time on this, Steve. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, Ellen.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Good night.
Pleasure. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Go forth and start reframing.
All right.
Cool. All right. And as I put in the chat, if you have any stories, please share them. from trying it out. That's always useful for people to hear.
Yeah, I see some good dialogue in the chat.
Good night, everybody.